Welcome back, dear listeners, to another powerful episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, the podcast where we talk about the messy middle, the plot twists, and how your mind and heart can actually get stronger through change. I'm your host Avik, and today we are leaning into a topic a lot of people quietly fear: divorce, big life transitions, and who you become on the other side. So, our guest, dear listeners, please welcome Brenda Bridges. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Amazing. So, dear listeners, before we delve deeper into the discussion, I'd quickly love to introduce you with Brenda. So, Brenda has lived it from every angle. So, she went through a distress divorce herself, felt the chaos and the uncertainty, the fear about money, the questions like, who am I now? What do I do next? Will life ever feel good again? So instead of staying stuck in that story, she turned it into a kind of mission. Like, Brenda is a divorce mediator, best-selling author, and the founder of Bridging Divorce Solutions based in Chattaganga. So she's an expert in both the process and finances of divorce today. And she is passionate about how it could be, I mean, it could be done better in the future. So she brings this perfect mix of warmth, insight, and the straight talk. And her whole vibe is divorce does not have to be a war. It can be a conscious transition, a reset, a bridge to a healthier life. So if you are navigating a breakup, a divorce, a career shift, or any kind of identity shakeup, this conversation is for you. So I'll not take much of your time. Let's get started. Welcome to the show again. So Brenda, you have been through what you call a distress divorce. So let's start there for a moment. Like when
Okay.
everything was, yeah. So like when everything was falling apart, uh,
Mhm.
what did the very first step of rebuilding actually look like for you in the real life?
That's a really good question because it goes on the process or beyond the process. For me, it was gradual and one small step built on the next small step. There's a lot of healing that needs to go on
Mm,
for many people, not all, but many, through the divorce process and after the divorce process. And I think the most important first step was trying to recenter on what was authentically me and important to me and what my values were. I was married for 26 years. The divorce took about a year and a half. And during that time, the time being married, part of the nature of marriage is you make decisions based on the whole or the team. And in a non-healthy marriage or relationship, I guess, some of those decisions can get really skewed so that there's a lot of habit, but maybe not a lot of thought. So one of the first healing steps for me as I went through divorce and post-divorce was to kind of do a deep dive on what was important to me, how I wanted to live my life, whether I was making decisions out of habit or decisions out of choice.
okay. So like for someone who's listening who is in
Mhm.
that raw stage right now where um the emails and the court dates and money fears feel kind
Mhm.
of louder than everything else, then what would be one uh, grounding question or maybe the action they can use today to create even 1% more safety? What do you say?
I love that. I think if people keep in mind their purpose, their goals,
Yeah.
and that becomes their true north, that is the first and most important thing, because if you're taking action without knowing the outcome that you want, you're very unlikely to get it.
Hmm.
If you're clear on not the messy middle we're talking about, what you're going through, but what you want things to be like when you're done, you're much more likely to keep the focus, keep that as your true north, and be able to, maybe you don't achieve all of it, but you're going to get a lot closer than if you're really just, as you said, you're in that messy middle, you're in the emails, you're in the court dates, you're in the meetings. If you can only think of your next thing to deal with, uh, the chaos can take over. If you can take some time to get real with what's important to you long term, maybe you're doing a values exercise and you're honing in on what your key values are. And then you've got a measuring stick when you're going through all that crazy to be able to say, is my response or my reaction to this thing in line with my values?
Yep, I agree. Totally agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I mean, uh, like if a listener is going through a hard season and thinking that there is no way any of this is very, very useful, then what would you say to help them start seeing their experience as data and potential wisdom, and not just a kind of damage, per se?
So let me see if I'm understanding that correctly. You're asking, how do people start, like, basically looking at the fact pattern of what they're going through and
Uh,
figuring out how to move forward?
you can say, yeah.
Okay. Um, this is going to be a double-sided answer because I think part
Okay.
of it is understanding what you're faced with. What is your decision? What is your action? What are you being asked to do, or what are you asking yourself to do?
Hmm.
Um, and try to distill that down. And then there's a flip side to that, which is realizing what emotions you're going through and trying to understand, are you reacting? Are you making your decisions based on the emotions? Because divorce is, it's a very emotionally laden process. It's fun. Like, if you look at research, it is the second most impactful event, life event you can go through. And it's second only to death of a spouse. And I would argue that it's got all the same, or a lot of the same. I can't say all because nothing is absolute,
Hmm.
but it's got a lot of the same characteristics. But you're also losing your traditions, your life as you knew it. You're starting all over again. You're going against plan because for most people, this is not what they planned, even if they're the one who wants the divorce. So there's so much emotion going on. It's easy to let that drive. But if you let it drive, you might not understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Yep.
So if on one hand, you recognize the emotions and understand how they're impacting your decisions, it might be driving guilt or shame or revenge or anger, rage, like none of those you'll notice are really positive emotions.
Hmm.
It could be driving, I guess, a desire for freedom and a reset and things that are more positive. Regardless, the emotions can drive. If you recognize that, and then going back to the first point, you look at the bare bones of what you're dealing with. What are you in this moment truly being asked to do, decide, take action on, get through, whatever the case may be? Um, and then go back to your values. Are you acting aligned with your values or are you not? And sometimes our emotions can pull us way far away from our values. So if you're able to chunk it down into those categories, I believe you're more likely to get a better outcome.
Hmm. Understood. And like you have a deep expertise in the finances of divorce, and money is one of the biggest anxiety triggers during any breakup. So how do you see the financial fear impacting the mental health and decision making in your clients?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it is fear of the unknown.
Uh-huh.
People are, it depends on your process and your professionals and where you live, certainly. But oftentimes people are asked to make financial decisions without good information or without understanding the impact of those decisions. So they don't have context. And
Yep.
the more context anyone going through the financial decisions can have, the more comfortable and empowered they're going to feel in making their decisions. So it's kind of like a financial reality check. In divorce, people are they're looking at what they have together and what they owe together, and they're figuring out how to sort that out, who takes what. But in order to sort it out, they need to understand what they have and what they owe. So that's a big part of it. And then if support, like alimony or spousal support or maintenance, it's called different things in different areas. If that's part of the conversation, they need to understand what they need to live on. You know, what are their expenses? What is reasonable? What is not reasonable? And they need to understand what's coming in, who makes what income. And that if it's boxed in those that knowledge or those parameters, then they have good information to start making choices. And I think things go south if people have unrealistic expectations. So, example would be if someone lives in a state where there's a guideline for alimony and that state has a formula, and either party is going in either saying they're going to go outside of the formula, they're kind of setting themselves up for perhaps a rude awakening. Um, people will come into my office and start off saying, I'm not paying them a dime. Well, maybe, but maybe not. And until you have all the information about your financial situation, you really can't say, as well as the laws where you live, because it's different everywhere.
True. Exactly.
Hmm.
And suppose if someone is listening and they feels totally overwhelmed by the numbers and the legal language, what is the one practical um, conversation that you would recommend they should prioritize first to protect their future self without kind of spiraling into the panic?
I think information is key, and there are lots of different sources for that information. And I realize some of it depends on means. If people have the means, they can
Uh,
hire a professional to coach them in the area that they don't feel secure in. So whether it's a CDFA, a divorce financial analyst, or maybe it's a parenting coach, or maybe it's a divorce coach, um, find an expert to support you in the areas you don't feel solid on. And then I realize not everyone can afford that, but there are still resources. So if you aren't able to fill that need with a professional and hiring someone, look for good resources like your podcast, um, like other vetted professionals helping explain things. And I would say at the same time, beware social media from anonymous commenters. I'll see a lot of groups where someone who's going through the process or is done with their divorce and trying to figure out how to move on will post a question, and they get all these answers from folks who are anonymous or not known to them. And then they take it as fact, when in reality, a lot of that is misinformation. So I would advise people be careful where you're getting your info and make sure it's from someone who is qualified to give advice in that area. You know, you you go to a financial person for financial support, whether it's direct one-on-one coaching or whether it's research online. Go to someone who is well-versed in co-parenting if that's where you need support. If you need a therapist, find a therapist as opposed to, reaching out in a Facebook group and sharing your sorrows, and then you don't know who's giving you information or counsel. So, I guess long-winded answer, but, I think it's really important to know where your information is coming from and make sure it's coming from a source you can trust.
True. Exactly. So, any advice you'd like to give to the listeners today?
I think information is your friend. I think don't ignore your emotions. It's important to pay attention to them because otherwise they can come out sideways if they're not heeded. Um, they need attention. I think if you feel pressured to make decisions or if you don't feel comfortable with the information you have to make the decisions, don't make the decisions. Wait until you're in a space where you feel solid. It's okay to ask for that space and time. I would also say, I guess, really specific to divorce, you have choices about how you go about the process. Some of it is dependent on where you live and what's allowed in your jurisdiction, in your area, because it is a legal process. But know that your relationship was unique, your marriage was unique, your divorce can also be unique, and you don't have to cookie cutter it in the court system. You can look at the things you and your going to be ex-partner need to decide and manage and how you communicate, and then you can pick a way to go about it that best suits you. It doesn't have to be, face off and go to court.
Yep. Lovely. Amazing. So, dear listeners, what a lovely conversation. If you are listening right now and working through a divorce, a breakup, or any major life transition, here is what I want you to hear. You are not just losing something, you are also meeting a new version of yourself.
Mhm.
So, yeah. And I'd say you do not have to have a 5 year plan. You just need one act of small respect in this season. So, if this conversation with Brenda spoke to you, share it with someone who is in the middle of a hard transition and needs a reminder that there is a bridge, not just a cliff. So, Brenda, if someone wants to connect with you, what will be the great medium to connect?
They can go to the website, which is Bridging Divorce Solutions, or my name also points at it, Brenda Bridges. And if they want to set up a call or send us an email, the contact information is there.
Amazing. Great. So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links into the show notes for easy reference. And with this hope, until next time, stay healthy, stay happy, and thank you so much.